Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you guys so much for stopping by for another episode of Friday Reads, aka we're talking about all the books I read this week and or plan on reading this weekend. So let's get started. The first book I was able to complete was Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's the first book in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I enjoyed it. It wasn't as fun like it was in the beginning when we are introduced to Carl, and we are also introduced to this new concept of like being a part of a game simulation where like you literally have to fight for your life against like human monsters, alien intergalactic monsters, and beat each level. And I thought it was really cool. I liked the concept. It was really fun, but over time, I felt like for me, it just kind of felt more so like a tutorial kind of thing. So, if you play video games, you have a portion in the beginning where it's just tutorial based and you have the option to skip. If not, if you want to figure out how to play the game because you don't really know, then you follow the tutorials and it takes some time, right? This is how this works. This is how that works. This is how this works. It just felt like a bit like a task having to kind of like go through all of them. And then for me personally, because I'm not the type of person that could get into or is even aware of like how bombs are created, what it even looks like when it's like released in a particular way and how it blows up and what it looks like. So there was an epic chase scene that just kind of went over my head because there was like a lot of technical language. And I'm not like a fan of like action movies like that. Like I love zombie like flicks and stuff like that. And I'll tolerate action movies, but I'm not well equipped to visualize some of the things that were happening. Like when they're talking about the motorcycle being built, once again, it went over my head, but there were some parts that I understood. And so to me, it just kind of felt like there were times where like I was immersed, and then there were times where I was like, there was like a firewall that's kind of like blocking me from being able to like gain access to like what's on the other side. It was funny, but like there were some things that were happening and they just kind of went over my head when they fought the roly-poly pig, and it was like multiple pigs in the big ball, and they built like this kind of like contraption in order to trap the ball. Like it was there were just things in there that I was just like, I don't know what this means, but I'm assuming that this is cool. My favorite boss fight actually was when they were fighting I think his name was Kyle, but he's like the ultimate gym bro. And like Carl was like fighting him. He's like, ow, bro, ow. Like I thought that was not cool, bro. I thought that was pretty funny. So we get some juicy details in regards to the shadowy figures behind the scenes. So we know about the Borant Corporation, who is in charge of overseeing the games this term or this season, but we also see that they are not necessarily in control. Well, obviously when we think about in the grand scheme of like the galactic, obviously it's bigger, right? It's bigger. And so obviously the Borant Company is just one entity in a ginormous grand scheme of things. But we do see that there is someone of higher power looking at the Borant Company, and they're like, okay, you need to figure something out because y'all owe us some money. And so they're on the sidelines trying to see like how the Borant Company is going to be able to recoup things. You see the Borant Company shaking in their boots, and they're trying to speed the games along and trying to rush things, and things are kind of like messing up, and things are not exactly what it's supposed to be. And so there's like a lot of employees that are working during the games, and they're just confused. They don't know what's going on. But there is talks that there is some stuff that's like outside of their control that is happening. But this could directly influence how things go down for them during the games, especially the crawlers. This rush to have everything completed and finished, it definitely takes a toll on the crawlers and how things are just kind of like happening. And then you also see a lot of humanity in this in this book too, because it's like we're thinking, okay, so like these entities are monsters, and the goal is to kill them in order to succeed and move down the levels. But a lot of these entities, they're just like normal galactic beings, and they're here with a job, and a lot of them have goals at the end of it. They want to go back home, they want to go back to their planet, they want to go back to their family, and a lot of them are under contract, so they have no other choice but to be there. It's a really sticky, unfortunate situation, but it's really funny and it's very interesting. And so I'm definitely looking forward to see what happens in the series and how everything just kind of unfolds, because Carl has a lot of questions, and because everything is being surveillanced, it's hard for people to offer him or provide him any answers. And so you see them trying to figure out ways to kind of work against or work behind the scenes or work behind the system. And so I'm really interested to see how, like I said, I'm really interested to see how things unfold. So the next book that I managed to finish was The Love Lyric by Kristina Forrest. So I didn't like this book as much as the other books in the Green series. And I talked about the synopsis in my last video. But we follow the older sibling, and we get into her life and just her opening up and reintroducing herself to the dating scene, with the intent of not necessarily dating around, but finding a partner that she can be with and create a stable relationship, a committing relationship, a lasting relationship. She is introduced to Angel in the first book, The Neighbor Favor, through Violet. So Angel was supposed to be introduced to Lily, but they wasn't really feeling each other like that. But at that at the event, or what was it, I think it was the anti-wedding, I think, is where Angel actually speaks to Iris. So I think there was a gathering, a social gathering beforehand where he's seen her and he didn't speak to her because he was supposed to be speaking to Lily. But at the anti-wedding, he actually speaks to her, and that was cut short. And then at Violet's wedding, I think, is when he speaks to her again and they actually hold a conversation. So it was okay. I just think for me personally, Iris just wasn't as vibrant of a character to me in order to be able to last an entire book. You know what I'm saying? And sure, there's a lot of things that she's been through that would be worthy of great conversation and very thought-provoking and very feeling, you know what I'm saying? It gives you it makes you deep is what I'm trying to say. Jeez, I feel like the things that she went through, it could have introduced us to a lot of deep conversations, but instead we focus more so on Angel, his celebrity status, and how that may or may not potentially be a problem or pose as a conflict in a potential relationship. For Iris, it's not something that's worth pursuing. And so she grapples with this idea for a good portion of the book. And to me, it just wasn't good enough. As far as entertainment wise. We do get deeper into more specifically her thoughts on losing her husband and now having to be a single mom. And we see the amazing help that her family is with her. So there's really not much to worry about as far as that department. We just more so focus on just a potential relationship. And it just wasn't that great. Now, I wrote down some pros and cons. For pros, I like that we touched on the relationship with Terry. And for the past couple of books that, from the Green series, I was interested to see or get to know Iris a lot better because I felt like she had the deepest story. Now let's go into the cons. Obviously, I liked the writing. It was great. Well, okay, we'll talk about that. The writing to me, I don't know. It just felt really, I don't want to say cliche, but it just felt really by the book, because there are times where we go into the feels and it's usually the same reaction. And I know that's supposed to be a characteristic or a trait, or a characteristic or a behavior pattern where like she constantly bites her lips, and that is like an external expression of like her thinking or being nervous or whatever the case may be. That happened constantly, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And I think if I was reading this alone, it wouldn't be a problem. But because I had recently finished Excuse Me Why I Ugly Cry by Joya Goffney, and Quinn did that a lot, I was just like, oh my gosh. And I just couldn't help but picture like if Quinn grew up, she would have been like Iris, because their reactions are the same. So she bites her lip a lot, and anytime Andrew touches her or gets near her, her body heats up. And I didn't want to make it about it being like a menopausal kind of like joke or anything like that, but I just couldn't help that like every single time they interact with each other, it was the same body response. I felt like some of the intimate like scenes, it just kind of felt a bit juvenile to me, which is like crazy because, and I guess we can say that this can kind of like relate to the person, I guess, and like their actual like schmeck's life. But it just seems like all of the sisters, like, or just in romance in general, in order to like make it seem like when something happens, it feels worthwhile, they don't ever seem to be getting any before they get into like this particular relationship. There's always seems to be like a dry period where like they don't get anything, and so they get into the relationship, and then it's like just this like amazing like event. And so I just that needs to be studied. That's very interesting. That's always the case. It just seems like a lot of people in the romance books that I'm reading, they're not getting anything, and then they get into a relationship, and then it's just like a dam bursts. All right, so let's talk about the cons. So I said I didn't care too much about their relationship. It was dull and uneventful. Other than Iris' many uncertainties about committing to a relationship, there seemed to be nothing there that made me excited for their relationship. I also said Iris claiming that her reasons for not dating Andrew because of his stardom lacked depth. Other than a small viral moment, his stardom never got in the way of them hooking up. Which is like, yes, like throughout the entire book, there was this doom and gloom fear of like, if I date Andrew, then it's going to mess up my ordinary life, my private life. But when they were hanging out, when they were literally going on their meet and greet tour, and they were constantly locking eyes and constantly like smiling at each other and doing all this stuff, it's like the fans didn't care. Maybe like one person said something, but it didn't go viral. Nothing happened. The earth continued to spin. Like everything, nothing changed. Okay? The circle of life continued. And so this whole constantly just putting that out there. It was just like, girl, okay, I can understand if something happens. And even when something does happen, it wasn't even that crazy. And so I was just sitting here and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just needed to see evidence in order for me to be like, okay, I get where you're coming from. But like nothing was happening in the book for her to have that level of presumed anxiety. So I said towards the end, she switches it to it being because of her losing Terry, which honestly, I would have liked if we explored that more. Honestly, at first it was okay. But after towards the last third quarter of the book, I was just like, okay, are we still harping on this idea? Like, it's like, seriously, just come on, like, let it go. Like, just have fun or just leave him alone. Because here's the thing, it literally, like, it felt like a roller coaster ride that Andrew was subjected to. And we'll get into his character as well. But to me, it just felt like it was just so unnecessary. And it was just only there in order to thicken the plot, you know what I'm saying, or to create some sort of plot. And I personally didn't want to be subjected to it any longer. But it's not just the stardom part too. It's also it's this conflict of interest, because it's like he's the brand ambassador. He's the new brand ambassador for the company that she works for. And so there was this feeling of like, oh, you know, like maybe we shouldn't do it because like look how it would look. But we don't necessarily really explore that too much. It was just more so heavily on like him being a celebrity. She came across as someone who doesn't know exactly what she wants. moments. And so it makes me question whether or not she truly loves Andrew or is just happy to be with someone and no longer lonely. In the review, I called Andrew her new safety pillow. When he goes to her house, like, she has like a favorite pillow that she likes to sleep on, and it makes her feel comfortable and secure. I equated him to that because I felt like it didn't seem like they liked each other. Like, for me, I guess it makes sense that Angel has a crush on her, but for her to fall in love with him, like, it didn't make any sense. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. Another thing that I mentioned, I said the siblings' partners felt like pawn pieces in this book. The fact that they're now relegated to following each other was so irksome. There was no Nick without Xavier. Oh my gosh, I don't remember saying all these things. I wasn't angry or anything when I wrote this. Please believe me. There were times where like the partners would come around and they were like walking. It's like a line. You know, like the lines we used to like have to walk in elementary school, and we had to have our hands on our lips. And, like, we had to, like, walk down the halls quietly so we wouldn't disturb the other classmates. It kind of felt like that everywhere that they went, like, or whenever they were around, they were walking single file out the back door or from the backyard into the kitchen or whatever. And it just, like, I don't know. There was a cute moment where Xavier puts his hand over Violet's mouth because she says something funny. And so you see a little bit of a personality there between their relationship. But other than that, like, it just felt like they were pawn pieces. All right, so for me, okay, so now we're going to get into Angel. So I said, Angel lacks a solid stance. At times, he found ways to influence Iris to his liking, but then she'd renege and he'd just let her. Okay, so pretty much what I'm saying here with this situation, I think I was typing really fast, but pretty much what I was saying during this situation is his inability to stand on business. He would say to Iris, like, hey, like, I really like you and I really think we should give each other a chance, and then she would be like, yeah, sure, I think so too. And then she'd be like, you know what, I changed my mind. And he'd be like, sure, yeah, like, I understand. Just in order for him to come across as like the kind of romantic partner that's understanding for the sake of like scoring brownie points, in my opinion. And for me, I just feel like, yes, it's cute. We would all love like an understanding love interest, but at the same time, he was putting himself in a position to be going through these emotional roller coasters that he did not want to go through. And I don't think that that's fair to him, because it's like, if he really loves her and he really wants to prove to her that he can be a great partner, then he should be allowed to show that. And she should be open to experiencing it or not experiencing it. But I don't like how like she just cut him off and he's just like, I understand. Like, I felt like there should have been a little bit more pushback, because if anything, it just shows a kind of dynamic that is not healthy or conducive. So Iris constantly being at the driver in the driver's seat of this maybe not relationship, I just felt like it wasn't fair to Angel, and I wish she would have spoken up oftentimes than not. But then you see how you see the relationship dynamic between Angel and his mom, and it's understandable that he ends up being that kind of person that allows Iris to put him on this roller coaster ride. So, and also too, to me, it also came across as contradicting, because how can he be a character? How can he be a partner that's completely understanding, or he can be a man that is understanding, when you see how that contradicts like how he treats his mom? Angel is very lenient and understanding with Iris, but when it comes down to his mom, it's very like, this is how this is, and so this is how I will receive it, and I'm not dealing with it because I'm protecting my peace or whatever the case may be. So I was saying, so he's okay with Iris playing with his heart, but isn't okay with his mom not liking a career path that he himself isn't happy with any longer. Cora is a devout Christian who rejects her son performing secular music. Instead of Angel understanding where she's coming from and working with her to reach an understanding, he feels it's best to distance himself from her. Clearly, she's been down a road outside of a Christian lifestyle and saw how damaging it was for her. So why is it so hard for Angel to understand her stance? I understand that it can be problematic when someone projects something onto you that you are not. But at the same time, if she's listening to his music and he's talking about certain things, he's in music videos and he has his shirt off, and so I can see how it looks a certain way. But it's like she's gonna have her viewpoints and he's gonna have his viewpoints on this situation, and she's gonna maintain her level of assumptions and she's going to keep it that way if there is no, hey, let's have this conversation. It's going to stay that way. It's not going to fix itself. That's your mom at the end of the day. And so you want to be able to bridge that gap and to not have this kind of difficult relationship. Regardless of how problematic a person is, no one is exempt from being taught anything. No one is above having that conversation or having that dialogue. And so I felt like he could have spoken to her. I felt like we didn't have to leave it at like, oh, you know, she's this strict Christian who isn't with the times, and so therefore I can't associate myself with her. It was just like, well, if he's going to be that way, then let it be that way, but don't use this as a way for him to come across as like a great guy because he's so understanding, but then it's like he treats his mom a different way. So I said, when Iris and Adrian leave the ceremony after Iris tells his mom off and Adrian just stands there like a child, it made me think of a big sister standing up to her younger sibling's bully. So to me, it was just more so about the relationship. I just felt like they weren't great for each other. So the next book that I ended up finishing was Good Girl. I finally read it. I bit the bullet and I just bought an e-copy on my Kindle. And so Good Girl by Aria Aber. We follow a young lady named Nyla. It's pretty much just her reflecting on a period in her life where she was making it a goal to self-destruct. During the time where she was like desperately trying to flee herself because there was just so much shame that was compacted within her, and it was coming from all sides. The source was everywhere. It was this, in a way, unconsciously fighting against this label of being a good girl and what that looked like for not just society, but more so specifically within the Afghan culture. Her parents ends up leaving Afghanistan and going to Berlin. And then they have her in order to delay their deportation. We see how they try to instill these traditions and these rules into Nyla, but then she sees how everything around her doesn't reflect what her parents are trying to instill in her. So it's like, oh, like young Afghan girls or Afghan girls, just period, there's a certain decorum, there's a certain like rule that they must like align with and abide by. But then she sees how her Afghan cousins, her male cousins, they are exempt from these rules. She also sees how other European girls, they have access to other things that she is not allowed to. And so there is a psychological like game going on at play where it's like, okay, well, I'm supposed to be doing this, but like I see everyone else around me doing other things. And so there is also too inside of her this need to rebel because there is so much pent up anger and animosity to just everything that's happening to her within the apartment that she lives in, and how her parents are not properly able to provide for her, but then she's like surrounded by people who comes from a stable environment and they have a better household. Her mom then passes and she's not able to properly grieve. in the way that is healthy and conducive for her to be able to like move forward with her life. And so what she ends up doing is finding ways to escape. And so like her route of escapism is through drugs and this nightlife that is provided to her by at this place called the bunker, where pretty much anything that goes on in the bunker can happen in the bunker. There's no structure. There's no, hey, like, we can't do that. Anything can happen in there, and anything does. But not even just that. Even, like, in her neighborhood, being an Afghan girl and having to hide that identity for fear of, like, Nazis attacking them, or, like, for fear of, like, people attacking them, especially during the time of like the narrative of like terrorist attacks and 9/11. So there's this need to hide oneself. And so it's like, well, I can't be myself. I'm not even supposed to be here. I was only created in order to delay deportation. Why am I here? What's the purpose of my existence? And so there's a lot of fighting that she does internally, because it's like she personally doesn't feel like she belongs here. This book was just like, oh my gosh. And it was just like, I loved the writing. The writing was beautiful. Like, the emotions that it invoked, the frustrations that it invoked in me. Like, it was just like, for a long time in this book, I just wanted her to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, how could she, when she had to create this world, or she had to create this person that was not who she truly was, for fear of being attacked? And then her parents, they were the kind of people that the way that they saw things was through their level of discipline was how they disciplined. So it's like when she dates this freaking almost 40-year-old loser named Marlowe, and he abuses her, she thought that was a form of love language with her parents. And so of course she thinks like, yeah, he does this and like it's not okay, but I love him, and like, what else do I know? She's 19. You know what I'm saying? She's 19. Albeit she has like she lives she lives an adult life. Still in all, her mindset is she's still 19. And so she finds this guy named Marlowe, who I think she feels like she loves him, but I think that there's more to it. It's a psychological thing at play as well, as far as like someone older dating someone young, and then the manipulation that happens within that relationship dynamic. And she stays with him pretty much throughout the book. And one of the things that also happens too is how she seeks the abuse. She seeks the abuse from her mom. She seeks the abuse from Marlowe, because I think there's a part of her internally that wants to be hurt because she dislikes herself so much. And I thought that was really interesting too, in the way that it was just like displayed without being spelled out to you. I was just like, Aria is a good writer. I said she's lonely and insecure. She's an escapist who'd rather the real world dissolve than face it sober due to shame because she doesn't believe she's supposed to be here. She was conceived to delay her parents' deportation. The apartment that she lives in is unkept and infested with bugs. And her father is detached and uncaring of what she's doing as long as the neighborhood doesn't know about it. And due to her parents fleeing Afghanistan under deceptive circumstances during Russia's occupation of Afghanistan, they're no longer able to live a middle-class life. So there was that pressure there as well that was placed on her, like, hey, if we can't do it, then maybe you can. And so that adds another burden to her. All right, so anyways, pros. Okay, so a discussion of her strict culture, traditions, and rules contrasts with the loose/open and experimental world of Berlin. This is what I loved, the discussion of, and how this influenced her inner turmoil of contradictions of when reality doesn't meet or mirror what's expected of her. How can she be a good Afghan girl when she is in a European country? How is she expected to uphold Muslim traditions in a place that constantly perpetrates stories about Muslims on the news that are either dismissive, where where there's harm being done to them, or they're being accusatory of them when something terrible happens. Some of the things that I did dislike, I said it's frustrating how hypocritical Nyla is. She doesn't like her family's rules, but she submits to Marlo's rules. She's ashamed of who she is and where she comes from and hates being in that shame, but she submits to being shamed by the so-called friends and peers that she wants to be accepted by. Why does she like hurting people, pushing them towards negative emotions and seeing people in pain / seeing them hurt? Could it be that their vulnerability makes her feel superior because of how lowly she thinks of herself? I also disliked how she refused to give her father a chance, but she gives Marlo many. Not only that, she allows their relationship to have closure, which was, I was just like, come on, man. I was so mad at that. But I loved the book. It was really, really good. I love the writing, but to me, once again, it's just another situation where it needed to wrap up. It just needed to wrap up. So currently what I am reading, I know I'm supposed to be reading this book. I know I'm going to get to this pretty soon. I'm currently reading All Fours by Miranda July. I'm reading it on my Kindle. So I am currently 17% of the way into this book. I love it so far. First of all, Miranda July, I didn't know who she was until I knew who she was. Miranda July is the same person who created Me, You, and Everyone We Know. But that was one of my favorite movies when I was a teenager. There was a character who, the oldest son, I had such a crush on him during that time. But yes, I had a crush on him. But listen, the point that I'm trying to make is, if you watch that movie, if you know who Miranda is, then you will understand why this book is the way that it is. So we follow this no-name lady. She's like 45. And she is severely neglected by her husband. And I think that this even goes back to her parents. She's at a point in her life where it's all coming up to her. It's all catching up to her. And she's at a point in her life where she just wants to really just find herself. This is kind of sparked when her husband is having a conversation with her friends about parkers versus drivers. So parkers are people who need to be told tasks, and when they do something mundane like parking a car, they need to be applauded for the mundane like tasks that they do. Okay, I would also like to add another idea. So one of the things that her husband says is that when parkers are assigned a task of, like, say, parking a car, like literally parking a car, I describe it as mundane because for some it's like it's not a big deal, and then for some it can be really intense, like a lot of like brain working, figuring things out. It can be a very stress-inducing situation. My granny used to say, turning a penny into a quarter. And so it makes me think of that. And it makes me think of the main character in this book, where the reason why she can't cope with the so-called mundaneness of life now is because for her, everything seems to be a parking scenario or a parking situation. Everything needs to be detailed and felt and experienced to the minute essence, right? And I think that is kind of sort of her problem. We can chalk it up to, like, she's an artist and like she's eccentric and all that stuff like that. But there's also to this feeling of needing to be able to have some sort of audience. You know what I'm saying? Like, it kind of feels like a movie. It kind of feels like a kind of experience that is like a performance. Whereas drivers, they can go cross country. They don't need to have applauses. They're satisfied with their lives, and they can do small things, and it's enough for them. And so this inspires her to want to become said driver, because I think there's a part of her that wants to be accepted so badly by her husband, because this is the family that she chose. And so she wants to do what she needs to do in order to be accepted in some way, shape, or form by her husband. They sleep in separate beds. And whenever like things happen, like he's just very dismissive. To me, I wrote like, it's giving benign neglect, it's giving passive aggressive. And so there is this desperation at this point because she's been starved of attention. And so she decides to take a cross country trip from LA to New York. And what ends up happening is where I'm at right now, she takes a detour and like she's at a hotel right now and she's deciding to renovate the hotel, the janky hotel. And I just think it's funny. It's eccentric in a way that really just kind of like talks about the quiet thing. I was reading it and I was just sitting here and I felt like there was a lot of things that made me feel like I'm going through this in this part of my life, where she talks about moms and the sacrifices that we have to make in order to make sure that our kids are like good human beings, you know, to put out in the world, but like how it takes away from us in these ways that doesn't take away from our husbands. And like the being an artist and having to suppress that eccentric side of yourself in order to appease a more traditional partner. Oh my God. This is just such a good book, and I hope it stays good. I don't want it to like linger or anything like that. And if it does, I want it to entertain me enough to like make me feel like at least I'm being compensated. You know what I'm saying? And not my time being wasted. So yeah, I'm going to end this here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you guys were able to enjoy yourselves. Make sure you guys have a great day, afternoon, evening, night, morning, wherever you're watching in the world. Until next time. Peace.